Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody. This is the Dover Comprehensive Committee Update Committee. We are officially holding our public hearing on the comprehensive plan that we've been working on. To give everybody a little background, back in 2010, so this has been ongoing for a while, back in 2010, the town board at that time established the Master Plan Advisory Committee. And the task at that point was to review the 1993 master plan and make recommendations as to what should be changed, added, or even deleted from that document, because over time certain things that were a concern at that point may not even exist. And over the last 2 years, I think we've seen things happen that nobody would have ever expected. And then in 2020, at the beginning of 2020, actually right prior to the start of the pandemic, the town board officially re-kicked off that group by appointing the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and that's the group that we have here. The members of the group are myself, Richard Renia, Deborah Kaufman, who is sitting to my left, Valerie LaRobediere, sitting to my right, Jason Keller, sitting to my right, Marilyn Von Millen, sitting to my left, Steve Vincent, who could not make it this evening, and David Wylock, who could not make it this evening. In general, a little bit of general background on the town. It's something that we all have a general consensus of what we feel. That Dover is a very unique place. It's a very unique town. We have a lot of undeveloped open space. We have a lot of agricultural fields. We have a lot of forested ridge lines and a huge valley bottom. If you drive up Route 22, you can see most of this just by traveling on the highway. You don't have to pull off onto secret roads to see some of the gems of Dover. You see it everywhere you go. Sometimes it's, for some of us, we're so busy and we're racing around here, you even forget, and then every once in a while, you're taking a breath, or maybe you're driving up and down the road, and then you take a look out, and it's like, oh, we do live in a very beautiful town. We also have something that's very unique that a lot of towns do not have. We have two hamlet areas. We have two train stations. That's something that this document goes into, that we really felt that those train stations, those hamlets, are really underutilized in this town. So you're going to see, or you see in this document, if you've looked at it, a very heavy emphasis on developing our hamlets and creating transit-oriented development and based around those train stations, because there's a lot of towns that just do not have one train station or something like that that they could really build a hub around. To help us and to guide us in some of this, we had conducted a lot of research that was happening prior to 2020 in that time frame from 2010 to 2020. A few key items that we were able to obtain and that we were able to work on was, in the fall of 2017, we did a public community outreach survey, and we had a large number of members of the community who responded. You could drop off your paper survey, you could go online and fill it out. So we highly utilized that to find out what the community wanted. And at that time, one of the number one wants was a grocery store, and in general, more retail and more business, some more services right here locally, so you didn't have to drive as far. So that was a general consensus on the business and retail side, and then the general consensus from everybody was to protect our resources, protect our view sheds. So as our committee, it's our job to try to find that balance, and we do believe that we have found that balance. We also had the Pace Land Use Law Center, who's affiliated with the Pace University Law School. They completed a survey. It was called the Route 22 Opportunities Analysis Survey, where they did an analysis of the town of Dover and strictly looked at Route 22 and looked at the different opportunities that there are. And they found that we do have a gem when it comes to Route 22 in the fact of that there's a lot of opportunities inside and on the edges of the hamlet areas to promote business. We have the opportunities along Route 22 for our scenic beauty. We also have along Route 22 a lot of access to other areas. So we have access to, say, the other parts of Dutchess County. It becomes a crossroads if you think of it that way. And then we also had from Hudsonia, in 2018, a natural resource survey, which we relied on heavily when putting this document together. The committee has spent a lot of meetings, a lot of hours debating these back and forth and trying to come up with what is the vision for the town. And we'll get into that in a second. A little bit of general background on what a comprehensive plan is. It's a town-adopted policy, so it's not law. It's not a zoning law, but it's a policy document, and it's something that we build on. Once this is complete, the town board can elect to move forward and build on this and make changes to laws based on this document. It's a blueprint for the future, and it's also a decision-making guide. So when future town boards make a decision, we're hoping that they look back to this document to say, yes, the community would like this. There's support for this, and that's the basis of this document. And it's going to guide policies and actions for the future. And one of the big key components that when we broke up this document, we didn't want it to read like just a report that would be boring for a lot of people to read. So we specifically broke it out from separate backup text where there's a lot of numbers into a separate section on goals and action items where they're bullet pointed very specific items of what we believe that the important action items are for the town. So that's how the document is laid out, but that's a very key point, is to have those goals and action items and make them very easy to read, easy to find, and very specific, so it's not something people can debate in the future. Oh, what were they thinking? A lot of times in reports, you might read a sentence and say, well, you could look at it this way or that way. We tried to be very specific when it came to our action items. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Sander, who is a planner who's been working with us, and he's just going to walk you through probably the first section of the comprehensive plan document and give you a little background on that.
All right, everyone. Hi, Peter Sander. Our comprehensive plan document was last revised in 1993, so that's about 29 years ago. It's going to be around 30 or so. And that document was fairly plain text, wasn't very appeasing to visually. So what we did is we revamped this. So as Rich kind of explained, our document is broken down into 3 sections. One is the intro, which just gives the general flavor of the town, outlines some vision that we anticipate the town moving forward to kind of achieve, and the goals of the document itself. Second, goals and action items, which is the concise bulleted list of recommendations. And third, the supporting documentations. We also have an appendix, which contains a large amount of information from land use maps, environmental maps, studies, and anything really that goes to support this document. So what I'm going to do is kind of break down the introduction a little bit. So right off the bat, the very first page of this document goes into what the town is. Really gives you a flavor, provides some graphic images to really show what a beautiful town this area is. Next, I kind of go into what is a comprehensive plan, because most people are not going to know what a comprehensive plan is. They think it's some sort of legal document of some sorts, which it is. But as Rich said, it's more of a roadmap for future policy decisions to be implemented by the town, or even infrastructure improvements, really to guide the town in how they want to grow. And then after kind of explaining what the document is itself, it outlines the goals of the document. So our goals can be summarized into 4 main points. One is to promote rezoning efforts, which that has been a major concern with the town. Is we have a lot of community feedback saying that they would like to do something in a particular area, but that's not zoned for it. So our comprehensive plan document really justifies why zoning changes are being made to kind of promote businesses and make the town vibrant in especially the hamlet areas. The next goal would be the development of a town inventory. So this kind of goes into our community resources, that being what sort of properties we own, what sort of transportation networks the town has, and all of that. So throughout the supporting documentation section, that really goes into depth of what the town has to offer. Next is encourage community involvement. This is a community document. Its comprehensive plans are described as living documents to reflect the community that it's supposed to be representing. So as Rich was saying, that we did community surveys. This is an all-volunteer committee, and we have everyone from all sorts of walks of life. So this document is really supposed to reflect the community, and it shapes those goals to be community-oriented. And then also is to guide future growth. And that this is a variety of, whether it's zoning provision changes or community growth, infrastructure, all of that. So this document is supposed to promote these specific goals and really guide us into the future. Next, I want to just kind of give everyone a chance to hear the vision statement that we developed for this. So while the goals are specific objectives, the vision statement is our general theme of this document, really why it's being generated and how that's going to shape our future in this town. So I just want to read the paragraph for our vision statement real quick. The town's overall vision is to facilitate new and existing business development, encourage community growth that supports the health and well-beings of all residents, promote and support farming, promote use and enjoyment of our unique scenic beauty and natural resources, and participate in the growing outdoor recreational economy. So this all yields to us trying to create a very vibrant town that is very business-oriented, but really does preserve our scenic beauty. As Rich said, this town is a truly beautiful area. We have lakes, rivers, scenic views, and so that's really the general vision for this document, is to kind of promote that sort of resource preservation and business development. So other than that, intro is obviously the shortest section, so I'm going to send it back to Rich, who will go into more details about the goals and action items, which are the very specific recommendations developed to kind of guide the town.
Okay, thank you, Peter. As far as the way that the document is broken out, I told you we broke it out. We had goals and action items, and then supporting that is a detailed section on each one of those areas. I'm going to go through each area that we focused on and that the document focuses on, and then give a few pieces of what those focus on. It's a very detailed document that takes some time to read through, so I'm going to try to summarize and give everybody a general idea of what those sections are, or what's involved in those sections, or what the focus is on those sections. So the first section is community values and character. Within that, we're looking to enhance the character of Dover, improve the sense of community, to try to push policies that occur in this town to be driven by residents. So we're recommending resident input, and then also enhance the quality of life for everybody, increase community involvement. Those are some of the key items that you'll find if you read through the document under community values and character. The next section is demographics and economic development. One of the bigger issues here is looking at our population. Retaining our population is very important because we've seen actually a loss in population, especially in the younger age group. The younger age group seems to maybe go to high school in the town and they leave and they never come back. But we want the younger people to come back to this town and want them to raise their families here. We want to try to develop amenities, more amenities in the town, develop programs for seniors, promote economic growth, and attract new business. That kind of touches on what we talked about with the hamlets before, and then what Route 22 can do for us. And then also focus on development of the hamlet areas, which you're going to keep hearing that tonight because that's such an important piece of this. The next section is housing. So when you look at this town and what kind of housing is offered, we don't think that there's a big enough range of housing offered in the town. So one of the key items is to try to provide a broader range of housing options. And then that also goes with different needs of different people, whether you are younger, whether you are older. And we think that housing will help retaining certain population items that we talked about under, or we researched under demographics and economic development. If we don't have good housing that young people want to live in, then they're certainly not going to come back to the town. So a lot of these, they all are interrelated and they affect each other. So providing a broad range of housing options, promoting ownership. We think promoting ownership, whether it be a house, whether it be a condo, anything, if you can own it, people usually take better pride in it. So we're promoting that. Expand availability of good multifamily housing, as far as having that affordable living area, but that's good. That's a very high quality and very good quality that currently residents or people might have to leave town to try to find. We also want to focus on with the housing is trying to revitalize any blighted area. There's a lot of areas, there's little pockets here and there around town that could be revitalized. They're housing units now, but they can use significant upgrades. The next section is land use and zoning. So in general, what this section is looking at is reinforcing the Dover Plains and Wingdale Hamlets, preserve the town's natural resources, and enhance the town's overall rural character, while at the same time promoting appropriate areas for economic opportunities, for developing economic opportunities. This section is also looking at providing incentives for projects in the hamlets and near the train stations like I touched on in the beginning. This section goes into the need for central wastewater facilities. We need central wastewater facilities if we're going to expand our hamlets and have support for in the hamlets. We need that infrastructure. Dover Plains has water, but no wastewater. Wingdale does not have a water system, and Wingdale, the hamlet of Wingdale that is, does not have wastewater either. So in addition to wastewater in the Wingdale hamlet area, which is the area closer to the Route 22 area and the train station, we'd like to see a central water system there as well too. One of the other ideas that you'll read in this document is to take something like the Weebatuck Craft Village and see an area like that get revitalized and bring life back to it. Like we all remember from many years ago when there used to be craft fairs there and Hunt's Furniture was up in operation and the big giant chair was there on Route 55 and it used to be an attraction for people. A lot of people you talk to, they'll say, oh, I remember that big chair. The other thing that we found when we were looking at land use in zoning, when we went through the actual land use mapping of the town is the new zoning that was put into place in the mid to late 90s actually made some mistakes. There was some bad rezoning at that time, and a few examples that we see are along Route 22. An example would be if people are familiar with where Anna's Restaurant is, or it was the old Eagle's Nest. That's actually zoned residential. So that went from commercial in the 90s, and it was rezoned, and somehow it became 2-acre residential there. So a place that's always been a restaurant, always been a business, getting zoned or rezoned away from commercial and into residential doesn't make sense, and it's handicapped a property like that. In Wingdale, we see the same issue. Where El Universal is now, formerly the Paddlefish. It was a bunch of different. It was always a restaurant there for forever since when the state had the psychiatric facility. That's actually zoned residential as well. That site is handicapped because it's zoned residential, and it's harder for anybody to try to do anything. And what we see is on properties like this that were have these zoning issues, an owner is less likely to reinvest into a property like that, to either upgrade it or try to expand their business in that same parcel because If they want to do that, then they're handicapped when they go to the town or they go to a planning board, they're limited to so much, or they have to go to a ZBA and they have to try to prove why it's a hardship. So those areas, we're trying to correct that. So that's another thing that this does, but it's specifically in the land use and zoning areas. The next area is natural resources. The theme that you're going to see there is protect and maintain the continued utilization of natural resources, ensure this supply of natural resources for all the generations to come. In this section, you're going to read about protection of wetlands and steep slopes, to promote our natural resources, encourage agriculture, and encourage tourism. We want to invite people here to see our natural resources, and then we also want to have a balance of natural resources, the use of these natural resources, because we do realize that we do have natural resources and we should use some of them, but we don't want to overuse them, and we want those to be here for everybody. For years to come. But some of those natural resources are like our timber industry, or even our natural resources of gravel and minerals. Dover, one of the things that founded Dover was the marble quarries. Dover was well known for the Dover Marble Company. Dover Marble is in Arlington Cemetery. Dover Marble is on buildings in New York City. So we've always had this industry in town, and we want to keep supporting it, but it's got to be done with balance, because you can't just let industry take over. Everything in moderation. The next section that's in the document is community resources. So in community resources, we're going to see about providing municipal facilities and services. Community events. We want to have see that the town boards in the future are always promoting community events and supporting those community events. We want to see the town boards supporting and always improving the recreation facilities that we have, improving the parks, and finding grants to always be putting something back into our recreation and our parks, and expanding those as well too. One of the things that we're recommending under this section is for the town to have an inventory of land, an inventory of the land that the town owns, and just a general inventory of the land in the town. We found that the town does own a bunch of different parcels, and we think that they're underutilized for the community. The other component under community resources is capital improvement funding. We want to see some recommendations are asking town boards in the future or the recreation committees to actually prepare capital improvement funding plans, so they can have 5 or 10 year plans and goals to try to raise money or try to put money away to support that, so projects can happen, important projects. The next section in the document is transportation. The general theme of transportation is provide a safe and efficient transportation system. We are a rural community, so sometimes that's very difficult. So transportation is an important section of this document. But we do have the train stations like we had talked about. So we do want to see encouragement of development around those train stations. Local roads are very important. We want to see the town supporting and keeping local roads. We feel that it's better if the town is there to be able to take care of the local roads. Sometimes there's certain issues where if you get too many private roads, there can become too many problems. The town is probably the best resource for taking care of our local roads. Another area that you're going to see under transportation is sidewalks. We would like to see improvements to sidewalks in the hamlet areas, but that all plays back to supporting and developing our hamlet areas. We need good walkability. We need good sidewalks. So areas where in our hamlet areas there are no sidewalks now, we'd like to see the town support getting grants and expanding those sidewalks. And then where there are sidewalks, and if they're falling apart or broken, we'd like to see those get repaired. And then the other area is outside of train transportation, public transportation, bus systems are very limited in Dover, and that's very difficult. We recognize it's very difficult for the town board to do much. But we're asking them to always kind of be supportive of that and always nudge the county to maybe do a little bit more. maybe the county could always do a little bit more for us to help local residents that maybe depend on a bus to get someplace. The last section, and it's last but not least, but a very, very important section, is historic preservation. As I had mentioned before, the town has a lot of history. It's a beautiful town. One of the things that we don't have is we don't have a specific historic district or historic area because the history of Dover is kind of spread out throughout the entire town. The general sense when you read through this section, you're going to see us talking about identifying and protecting and promoting restoration of historic buildings and historic sites. So we want to see support for identifying historic buildings and then having incentives to try to get private owners to want to restore those and keep those, and then protecting historic sites. And I think the town over the last few years has actually done a really good job on certain things like that. Like one example is the Dover Stone Church. That is a historic site. It's been protected, and they've acquired a lot of land around it, and still acquiring more. And it's become well known, well outside of the borders of Dover, well outside of the borders of Dutchess County. A lot of people have come to see that site. So the town has done a great job on something like that, and we want to see work like that continue. You're also going to see in historic preservation is incentives. We're going to keep hammering on incentives because it's not like the town can go and take taxpayer money to try to restore these sites. So we're going to try to incentivize private owners, come up with ways to incentivize them to improve their properties, improve these historic structures. We also want to see more local history, local history, try to partner with the schools to teach some local history, talk about Dover, talk about what's occurred here, talk about a real strong, rich history of a lot of people who have worked really hard and built a beautiful town. And then also promoting cultural exhibits. It seems like to go and get a little culture, you leave Dover and you go someplace else. We'd like to try to see if the town can partner, or maybe it's through the town hall, or maybe it's with some other groups, but to have a more, a better way or a series of cultural exhibits, something like that to create a stronger historic remembrance for everybody here, and they can see and understand and feel the history of Dover. That's all the sections that we have that comprises the document. Now, back in December, we had a public input session, and we did receive some comments from people who were at the meeting. We also received comments from the town's Conservation Advisory Council. So I'm going to go into our goals and action items and specifically read a few adjustments that we've made to the document from that time to now. Starting in the land use and zoning section, we had it was item number 9. So that item number 9 read, promote tourism by allowing restaurants, breweries, distilleries, wineries, outdoor recreation, etc. on large agricultural parcels. We did receive a comment, and it was actually a very good comment about it's generally a good idea, or generally an interesting idea, let's say, but it has to be governed correctly. You need restrictions on these sorts of things. So where I was talking about before, we wanted to be very specific in this document. We've now added text to that follows that we're specifically saying under special permit, because something like that would have to be done under special permit. It needs a lot of oversight. And then also added the text, these uses must respect existing adjacent residential parcels, not overburden local roads, and require additional buffers. So that helps to set the stage in future zoning, and also recommendations to the town board if we are going to try to incentivize large agricultural parcels doing something a little bit extra in exchange for keeping the large parcel, that we need to put oversight on top of that. And we have to be very careful with that fine balance to not affect adjacent residents or other residents. It's great to preserve large parcels, but we can't do it at the expense of other people. So number 11 is amend bed and breakfast lodging facilities amend the bed and breakfast lodging facilities regulations to promote tourism. Right now, our bed and breakfast facilities are a little bit limited on the number of rooms you can have, so it's not always cost effective for somebody to have a bed and breakfast, because I think you're limited to 6 rooms and you have to live on the site. So we had that in, but we also wanted to recognize that we have to protect the neighborhood. So we've added in the text, while protecting neighborhood character, because we want to have we like the idea of a bed and breakfast, but necessarily we don't want it to turn into a hotel, like an interstate hotel where there's cars coming in and out and it's heavy traffic, or they're turning that bed and breakfast into a restaurant rather than just serving breakfast. And then number 20 is something new that was added. The CAC had recommended that we specifically talk about centralized wastewater. So we've added the following text for number 20. Encourage the construction of centralized wastewater treatment plants as part of a medium high density development, especially within the hamlet areas. So that would be geared towards future developers or future development. When they propose to do something in town, we want to find a way in zoning that's going to really steer them towards doing a development that has that includes central wastewater facilities, with the idea being that if they could make it work, then they could leave expansion room so other areas of the hamlet could tie in the future, and it gives the town a starting point. When there is no wastewater facility to start with, towns are very handicapped. You can't even get, it's very difficult, I won't say you can't even, but it's very, very difficult to even get grant funding when you don't have a system. But if you're a community that has a failing wastewater system, you're going to get, or the chance to get a lot of grants. But if you have no system at all, then you're way at the bottom of the list. So we're thinking that this is a development type of incentive, or maybe a partnership with a developer, but we'd like to see that. We've also added number 21, which specifically goes to infill development. Infill development should be encouraged within hamlets, as well as medium-high density residential areas. So that could be a blighted property. We would like to see that revitalized, like I had touched on before. Or it could be an empty property, because if we have high density areas, then we want to see all those properties built out and developed, and keep that a very vibrant area. So that's the hamlet areas. That would also be the same for our suburban residential areas, which is our 1 acre residential zoning. We also made a couple of additions to the natural resources section since the last public input session. And the majority of these were based on comments from the Conservation Advisory Council as well. So we've added number 22, which is evaluate options for participating in carbon credit programs as a potential source of conservation funding. The idea, the CAC's idea on something like that is that there's money out there where different industries, they could be operating someplace else. They want to go and buy a piece of property and lock up its development rights so they can offset carbon credits. It could be in another state someplace. And we thought that was a good idea, because one of the things that we want to do is try to preserve these large parcels. And if somebody's willing to buy it and put a conservation easement over it and allow nothing to happen on that property, then that's a good way, that's another good way to promote or keep these large parcels intact. Number 23 is, or reads, the town should continue to leverage its participation in the 10 Mile River Watershed Coalition to increase its resources for preserving and enhancing conservation lands, particularly those that protect the watershed. And then number 24, we've added, establish thresholds for groundwater withdrawal to protect the aquifer from overconsumption. So we want to, looking at our zoning code, there's a great aquifer protection section of it, but it lacks a little bit of specifics. It doesn't require certain larger projects or certain larger, say, commercial type projects to take a hard look at how much water that they're actually taking out of the ground. The town of Dover, we're very lucky in the geographic location where we are. We do have a lot of water. We're better than some of the surrounding communities, but we can't take that for granted. These are some of the things, this is an example of where we're looking to protect things for generations to come. So I think that was it as far as what's changed since the last document. If anybody else has anything to say, I would say to the committee, please, go ahead and say. I don't know if Jason, you have anything you want to add, or
I don't think anything particular
Okay.
at the moment.
Valerie?
No,
Okay.
neither do
Deborah?
I.
Marilyn?
You covered
Okay,
it
I
all.
guess I did all the talking for the group. So I guess we'll open it up to anybody's comments, any of the public
Do we
comments.
have these as public?
What's that?
Those are public comments.
Those are the public people.
Oh, people who
Like to
want, okay.
speak.
So we have Jesse.
Good evening. My name is Jesse Gleason. I am a law clerk with the firm of Cabellino, Rothschild, and Egan. I'm pending admission to the New York State Bar. I've passed the bar. I'm just waiting to be sworn in. I'm here today.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
It's a lot of hard work.
I'm here on behalf of our client, Town Line Route 22 LLC. Attending with me today is Stephen Martins. So our client, Town Line Route 22, owns the third parcel in from the town line, 1316 Route 22. Currently, this is zoned as suburban residential. Our client wishes to use this property to operate an auto body shop. Under the current zoning code, they're unable to do so because it's a prohibited use. We're here today to express our support behind the comprehensive plan as it introduces a new zoning classification of gateway commercial. Under this comprehensive plan, the property owned by our client will be gateway commercial. After reviewing the comprehensive plan, it appears that our proposed use of the property is going to be squarely within the goals of the comprehensive committee. We acknowledge that the committee would like to place careful attention on the safety and the appearance in those areas. And our client has already taken precautions and steps to beautify their property consistently with what the comprehensive plan is. If I could have draw attention to Exhibit 1. So Exhibit 1 is a photo from Google Maps from September of 2016. As you can see, it's a little bit far back, but you can see that the driveway is very narrow. There's a lot of weeds taking everything over. The roof isn't particularly the best. There might be a broken window. I couldn't really tell. It's coming from the distance. And then you can see in Exhibit 2, it's a little bit closer. It's pretty much the same deal. It's been mostly a vacant lot since the 1980s. This image was taken roughly 2 months before our client had purchased it. You can still see the driveway and the parking lot are kind of run down. There's some weeds taking everything over. And then our client purchased it in May of 2019. And if I could have you show Exhibit 3. This was taken around August of 2020, roughly probably a year and a quarter after our client acquired this property. As you can see, there's a major improvement. The parking lot shines, there's curbage, there's new garage doors, the roof looks a lot cleaner and nicer. The whole exterior of the building just looks significantly better than where it was only a year and a half before that. If you move on to Exhibit 4, you can see it's a little bit closer up, but you can see that there's lights on. You can see a little bit of the interior of the building too, but overall the building has been cleaned up significantly due to the efforts of our client. And in Exhibit 5, pretty much the same thing, except now you can see that they've even gone as far as to add a gate to this. I think that goes to the appearance of the property as well as safety. And you can also see that there's a little bit of storage going on. It's still currently being used to store some vehicles, but there's plenty of space for the storage of vehicles and, presumably to operate an auto body shop. And even further than that, our client is willing to take even further steps to beautify this property to the satisfaction of the committee, and is willing to take any suggestions in order to do so. Overall, I'd like to reiterate, we support the comprehensive plan in its current form, and we suggest that in the update to the zoning code, in the schedule of uses, that an auto body shops be permitted in gateway commercial zones like this one. Thank you.
Thank you. I had mentioned a few examples before, and that's actually another good example. I didn't know you were having that here tonight, but that's another example of what we had talked about what happens when you have something that was zoned commercial prior, sitting there as a garage, gets rezoned more than 20 years ago to residential, and then it sits. And I guess their only option to do something there would be to convert that into a house. And I think that's something that the committee has done a lot of talking about, and identifying, trying to identify sites like that.
It's something that Pace agreed with as well.
Yes, yeah, and that was highlighted in the PACE land use study as well, too. Next on the list is Philip Van Buren.
Rich, look at that.
Good evening. My name is Philip Van Buren. I live at 54 Askins Road in Wingdale. But I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the organization, the Oblong Land Conservancy, of which I serve as secretary. The Oblong Land Conservancy owns 235 acres of nature preserve land in Dover and has easements on another 138 acres for a total of 373 acres of protected land. And our mission includes not just protecting land by ownership or control of development rights, but also has an educational component. That includes educating the public on issues relating to the preservation of the environment and natural ecosystems here in Dover, and the impacts of land use policy decisions made by the local municipality. The Oblong Land Conservancy is concerned about this draft comprehensive plan update, both for its specific policies as well as for the process up to this point. On the question of substance, while we appreciate the complexity of the task that this committee has had to undertake, we are concerned about the outcomes that you have come to. And your understanding of conservation as the area to be conserved is on the sides of the valleys, the uplands, and there you've created these resource conservation districts. But at the same time, you call for expansion of commercial and industrial development along most of the bottom of the valley, and along most of its major thoroughfares, but especially Route 22. We do not believe that this is a sound approach to conservation of natural resources, because in fact the bottom of the valley is critical to the ecology of the valley as a whole. It provides habitat for all manner of wildlife, extensive food chains on which other species depend, and essential breeding, nesting, and spawning ground for migratory corridors. If you pollute the bottom of the valley and kill off biodiversity there, and make it an ecologically impoverished zone or an impenetrable barrier of pavement, traffic, nighttime lighting, then you risk throwing the ecological system off balance. Disappearance of a bird species, for example, can lead to overgrowth of an insect species, which in turn can have impacts on trees and whole forests. The intensification of development, but particularly the commercial and industrial development, is inherently burdensome on natural resources. Large industrial developments, which this plan proposes to expand, have their own specific impacts on air and water quality, light, noise, views, and community character. I'm not going to go into that. Perhaps of greater concern, because of its greater geographic extent, is the expansion of highway business, such as the proposed highway commercial zones, the gateway commercial zones, and even the hamlet mixed-use zones, which have a host of detrimental impacts, from direct pollution from the business to increased septic loads, to the inherent pollution caused by impermeable surfaces, paved areas with storms, runoff, washing, road salts, chemicals, solvents, metals, downhill and inevitably into the Great Swamp and the 10 Mile River. The Audubon Conservancy and its work in trying to protect the natural resources of Dover will be directly injured by this plan if it goes through in its current form, because the plan establishes new gateway commercial, highway commercial, and industrial uses directly abutting 3 of its 5 nature preserves in Dover. The Slocum Mostachetti Preserve on Route 21 is now proposed to be virtually surrounded by commercial development. This cuts off its interconnection with the wider ecosystem when it becomes just a preserved green spot in the middle of an otherwise developed commercial area. So we're concerned about that. We're also concerned about the impact that commercial and industrial rezonings will have on water quality and biodiversity generally in the Great Swamp and the 10 Mile River. If you really want to protect the ecosystem as a whole, you would concentrate development in a few locations and try to increase green areas between. That means not just promoting growth in hamlets through denser zoning and development of sewage systems, all of which we applaud and think are a good idea, but that you also have to say no to development in some other places, or you have to say no to certain kinds of development. What you would not do is create a virtually unbroken line of development sprawling through the whole township from north to south. We feel that this expansion of commercial and industrial activity along most of Route 22 and Route 55 and Route 21 contradicts other goals stated in the plan. We've already talked about the impact of degrading the environment in the valley bottom on the larger ecosystem, which in turn will have an impact on the natural resources and natural beauty and scenic views that this committee purports to recognize and considers to be an asset. The plan purports to protect water quality, but when you compromise the environmental integrity of the Great Swamp by encroaching on its whole length with intensified commercial and industrial development, you destroy the one thing that protects the quality of groundwater throughout Dover, and that's the filtration capacity of the swamp. The argument that gateway commercial zones will add to the revitalization of the hamlets is a debatable argument, and I don't find in your draft plan support for how that will necessarily happen and why it doesn't, in fact, just further draw business away from the hamlet itself. So I don't know where you are in your process here, whether this is the end of the process, whether this is essentially a done deal. or whether you are open to any consideration of comments such as these. We could develop more detailed written responses, and would be happy to do so if you were in fact able to hear them and digest them. But we've been sort of concerned about the process because it's not been very well publicized. This meeting, scheduled at a sort of time that's not very conducive for people being able to get here, is just maybe one sample of it. But, you know, I've been a property owner and taxpayer in Dover for 12 years and have been a full-time resident here for the last 4 years and received no notice about this process happening. So the Oblong Land Conservancy has not received any notice either, despite our owning of a substantial amount of land here, and particularly when your committee was designing areas to rezone for gateway commercial, specifically in Dover, instead of it being at the entry to the town, it's actually separated from the entry to the hamlet by a nature preserve of 106 acres. And yet, it has not occurred to you to reach out to the owner of the nature preserve and determine their concerns about this now sandwiching it between commercial areas. If this process continues to be open and you do welcome our participation, we would love to try to participate in a productive way. That's our hope for the situation. But we'd like to hear from you about how we should proceed next.
Sure. I'll give a little background. So we're not at the end of the process. First of all, we're actually at the beginning of the process. So as I had said when we first started, this is an advisory committee. We're a group of volunteers, and we've been working on this for years now, compiling the information and doing all the work. Basically, a lot of work here at no cost to the town. So what our job is and what our role and what we're trying to do this evening is, this is our first official recorded public outreach, so to speak. We had a public input session in December. All of our materials are put up on the town website, so they're publicly available. But what we're doing now is this was to have an official noticed public hearing for the committee. And we're advisory only, so this is us trying to get out there and, you know, and make sure that it's reached out to everybody, as many people as possible, let them know what's going on, that we're working on a new comprehensive plan. And what our plan tonight is to take in as many comments as possible, reconvene the committee. We have a couple of scheduled meetings in March. What we'd like to do is get written comments from anybody who wants them by March 1st. Then we'll have them for a couple of meetings in March, and we want to go through those, dissect those. And if there's, if we think that there's some strong arguments, we'd probably give you a call and invite you in.
Okay.
What would happen after that is we'll make revisions to the document where we all agree to it. And then ultimately what I'd like to do, or our ultimate goal is to have consensus on this committee. And then we pass this document on to the town board. Once the town board receives it, then it's in their purview they could do nothing with it, or if they would like to move forward on it, then they would start the actual notification process, start a seeker process, do a circulation in the official capacity of the comprehensive plan. So we are at the early stages, although we've been working on this for years, but it's only gotten to this point where we felt it was ready to share with the public.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we can certainly try to get you some comments in
Yeah, that
writing
would be
by
great.
by the 1st of March.
And yeah, that would be great if you could do that. And then if you could get them to the town clerk's office, and then they'll have a record of it, and then we'll get them as well too. And then
Okay,
just a
that would be
couple of
good.
little, I won't even call them comments, but just items for discussion. The industrial part, we're really not looking to expand industrial in the town. One of the things that we started with was the existing zoning map, which has certain industrial areas, granted, And that's one of those balance items. But really, when you look at the map, there's very, very, very little in true industrial, separate from commercial. And the town is unique in how we have several different zoning districts, but we have a CO district that's more of a manufacturing, and then we have a highway commercial that's supposed to be more intense retail, though there's a very little of that as well too. That's kind of based right on the outskirts of the hamlet, to try to get your shopping and those, those things where a lot of people are going to drive their car to. So we have very little of that as well too. Like I said, we started with the existing zoning map. We wanted to fix a few areas, and generally preserve like the green that you see on the mountainside edges. That's our resource conservation areas. That's the way it is now in the zoning. So we really didn't change that because we thought that was good. That's our 5-acre zoning. Then the light green is the rural, the RU, which is 2-acre zoning. And another item that the committee has highly discussed is what you were talking about with Route 22. And what does it look like? And we as a committee definitely do not want to see it developed from the start of town to the end of town. Another thing that we recognize is that there's certain things that are just obstacles that will never get developed, because in our valley bottom is where all of our water courses, all of our wetlands are. And we have a lot of protections for that as well. So the wetlands are never going to be developed. There's, on all of the state wetlands, there's setbacks. We're recommending further enhancements of wetland areas. Then we have our stream corridors, which the town actually has in our zoning code right now, has our stream corridor overlay district, which has very strong language about protecting the streams. Structures can't be within 100 feet. The whole corridor is, the corridor is 150 feet on either side. So that's one thing that we would like to look at in a little bit more detail when we look at the zoning. But we have put a lot of discussion and talk into that. So we would welcome other ideas that you may have of how we can allow certain things, but then protect certain things as well too, and try to help us find that fine balance.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that openness. Just one item that you mentioned about posting of resources. I looked on the website to try to find this Pace University Law School study.
Okay.
That I didn't find it there.
We can make sure that we get that, the resources that I mentioned, we can get those up on the website. We can work with the town clerk's office to do that.
Yeah, I would appreciate being
Yes,
able to see that
yes.
document.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comment. We appreciate it. I didn't have anybody else on the list who signed up to speak. Is there anybody else in the public who would like to say a few words or give us any comments?
Hi, Adam Haid. I live on Old Forge Road. I would say just first, thank you. Thank you all for putting in all the time that you have and doing this. It's appreciated, and I think it's something that needs to be done. I would say I just have a couple of concerns, one being the floating zone. It's just seems like maybe you can explain it a little more how it would work, but to me it just seems like you have all your zoning regulations. However, if you have enough money to acquire enough land, then that kind of goes out the window, and then it's subject to what the town decides they want to do with it, or who has enough money to put a project there. So could you just elaborate on that?
When you say the floating zone, I think you're talking about, we have some recommendations or some language about an economic development zone.
Maybe. I know it said something
Which would
about
be-
floating, but
So our thinking is as hard as we try, we are never going to be perfect. We can't think of every potential use that might be the right fit for Dover. So our thinking is that what we'd like to do is, rather than a great project, which, if somebody with a great project comes along, that the town would really like to have, but because it's not allowed in our zoning, we'd like there to be some sort of an opening where somebody with a project could come before a town board. This is a general skeleton, a general thinking of how an economic development zone, which we're not proposing any area for it. So the first step in that would be to recommend that, and then in a zoning code update, if the town board chooses to do that, would be to develop the right language for it, but in essence, create something where somebody could come to the town board and they could say that they have a great idea. The town board could listen to it and say, we don't think that's a good idea and wouldn't fit in the town. Or they could look at it and say, that's a great idea. It hits all the keys of what we want. It protects the neighbors, it protects the environment, but it also allows some limited use of a property, whatever it might be, that they could basically petition to the town for a special project. But it would start at the town board, and then it would then go to the planning board, or at least our idea is, it would then start at the town board, explain what the project is, basically create the zoning for it, create what the restrictions would be, and then go to the planning board and in essence go through a special permit process. That's the general idea, and that's, in us thinking, like I said, nobody's perfect. We can't think of, what project might be perfect for the town 10 years from now in a certain location, because it's just not possible to do that. So that's our thinking, to say, let's leave a little flexibility in the plan in case somebody comes up with a great idea later on.
Would that area, would there already be a very defined area where that could happen?
No, our thinking was to not define any areas, because this is one of those we don't knows, as opposed to some neighboring towns. I'll use town of Amenia, for example. When they redid their zoning code the last time, they put in a resort development overlay district. And they were very specific to say, here's certain areas that we want resort development to occur. We weren't proposing that, because one of the things is us as a committee, we've also said that we're not here to pick winners and losers, to pick one person's property and say, here, you get this special, and the person next to you doesn't get it. And we're not here to do that. And to a certain degree, we didn't necessarily like the idea, and we discussed that. Do we want to come up with a specific overlay zone that would help drive economics in town, and then put it on certain parcels? And we opted away from that. We didn't think that it was right to, so to speak, pick and choose those parcels. We were thinking that maybe it should be more of our thinking is more of an organic process, where let somebody have a bright idea and then present it and see if they can meet all the requirements. But as I've always said, we provide recommendations for this. The devil would be in the details of zoning. So if that were to occur, then it's really having the right restrictions and the right language in, and how that's written in a zoning code.
Understand.
And that's our general and general idea, and these are more generalized recommendations to the town.
Understand.
If that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a little bit scary. I mean, I'd rather,
No, that-
it be more
understood.
defined, living next to a large parcel and seeing what happened with,
Right.
or what's happening with that large parcel. It just seems when you have these, when it's not concrete, then the people with the money are able to maneuver or get influence by, various means
Right.
that there's just creates too much wiggle room,
Right, and maybe that recommendation goes nowhere, once this goes to the town board as well, too.
Okay. The other thing I would just say is some of the, talking about agricultural properties, it just seems like some of the plan is in conflict with itself, in that the agricultural properties, to allow commercial use within an agricultural property, you are diminishing the agricultural use for commercial use. And ag itself, farm and markets, they're very lenient towards just that. They've already established that they want to support farms, and I do too, and allowing certain things that will, allow them to expand or keep the doors open or help out. And it just seems that what you're doing is going beyond what farm and markets have already established. And I think anybody that, is familiar with farm and markets and, you know, or lives next to an agricultural property, there's a lot of leeway that is given. And some of it's good, and some of it can, you know, people can take advantage of it.
Right.
And we've seen that.
Yeah.
So it makes me nervous that this plan is allowing even more of that. So I think that that's a major concern that I have. And then lastly, I would just also caution, you know, I feel like while many of the towns look at Airbnb and VRBO, and they're looking at it as, you know, having to be very careful by allowing this,
Yes.
allowing too much of it. And it seems like the plan is encouraging it so much, yet we don't have nearly what some of the neighboring towns have. So, you know, are we going to be the bed and breakfast for, you know, Kent and, you know, some of the other Sherman, or, you know, any of the other neighboring towns that really have more sights to see right now? I think, you know, it's great. We have the Stone Church, and we can, you know, continue that and work around that. But I just think you have to be very careful when you're encouraging that type of thing. Also, just because there's no pride of ownership. You know, are we going to allow, you know, tiny houses to be built all throughout the town? You know, and VRBO, we're known as the VRBO town.
Well-
So that's a concern as well.
Yeah, so I'd love to touch on some of that. As a committee, we've had a lot of discussions on everything that you're talking about, but I think that you might be confusing the bed and breakfast with the Airbnb side of things. So what I had mentioned
Maybe.
before was bed and breakfast, which requires an innkeeper. It requires somebody to be there. So actually, for this reason, one of the things that us as a committee, what we're recommending is we'd like to see more bed and breakfast where rooms are being rented out within a house. Some food is served like a typical bed and breakfast, but there's an innkeeper, there's an employee, there's somebody there who's monitoring the situation. So that's why we do support bed and breakfast. We'd like to see more of that in the town because of that key factor that there's somebody there. And then we have talked about the whole Airbnb industry. This is another example that I was saying in the beginning, that this is why we do something like this. Back in the 90s, nobody would have ever thought that there was going to be a website and you can go rent houses on it and that sort of thing. It's a new phenomenon that's, you know, really taken over in the last 10 to 12 years. But our general recommendation in the committee, I think we all general consensus, and we feel very strongly, and our recommendations are that the town has got to institute some sort of a registration program so that they know who the owners are. Because one of the big themes that we've always come back to as a committee is, well, what if you were living next to that? What if it was one of our neighbors? You know, what if it was the house right next to my house? And there was all these different people in and out, garbage is piled, whatever it is, or people are allowed, who do you call? You know, how do we have the right oversight on that? And, you know, that part of it's got to come back to the town side of things. But one of the things that we think is very strong is to have some sort of a registration program, know who the owners are, and maybe there's some sort of an annual permit fee or something like that. We don't have the exact answer on it, but we do feel strongly that that the Airbnb industry does need some oversight when it comes to that. And then the other thing to touch on that you had talked about was the agriculture. The large agricultural properties. One of the things that we're looking at with that is when you look at the mapping, and you can see it on the land use map, the tax map, we have a lot of large parcels, and we want to find alternate ways to keep those large parcels. One of our fears, we understand your fears. We understand, you know, the things that, you know, are scary on your side. The other fear that we have is, well, what happens to those large parcels? They're zoned residential. What could happen to them? If you read the code, and general planning is looking to have cluster subdivisions. If you take some of these large parcels and you do the math on them of what they could net, some developer could be looking at this and saying, well, the numbers net 400 lots, they could be clustered lots, and hey, even if I go and fight the town back and forth, I'll end up with 250 lots if I start with 500 or 400. That's one of the things that kind of scares the committee a little bit too, that we don't want to see it all turn into residential housing. And I think right now, we know that the housing market goes up and down. We're in a boom right now because there's a lot of people looking to buy residential properties. So this is an alternative of how do we incentivize somebody to keep that family farm, not sell that 300 or 400 acre parcel. But we realize though that they have taxes to pay on it, they have families to feed. So we were trying to come up with creative ways, and we're all open for comments on this for everybody in the public as well too, a creative way of how we can keep these large parcels. And one of them was maybe allowing a little bit more to happen on that parcel, but still associated with an agricultural use. So we were trying to come up with a way for that. Once again, I'll say it again, devil is in the details. But that's that's the part that scares us a little bit, that if every large parcel was to just be proposed residential, and then say in your neighborhood, all of a sudden, somebody proposes a clustered housing development and they take advantage of all the land. It's a beautiful spot. It's near the river. Other people would want to live there, but if you had 200 clustered houses there, that would be, something that I'm going to guess you might not want as well. So we're trying to protect on that too. And there's whatever we do, we're never going to find a perfect solution. But we would like to welcome everybody's input and any ideas, all ideas on the table for sure.
Sure, sure. I would just say, just as to use Old Forge as an example, because that was the rumor that was going around that saved the farm because, it could turn into a large subdivision. That wasn't the case. That's where zoning comes in. You have 5-acre zoning. You have your setbacks, wetland setbacks, steep slopes. You restrict it that way. So to use that as an example, the property itself was more valuable as a whole than the sum of its parts. You were never going to subdivide that property to where a developer would look at it and say, oh yeah, I can put in, well, how many houses can I put in? When you look at steep slopes, you look at frontage, you look at, zoning, 5-acre zoning, you add this all in and, well, okay, I can only get 6 lots out of 100 acres, and then you do the math, I'm buying this for $2 million, and even if I put one house here, now the farm's value just went down X amount. So, and by the way, I'm a real estate agent for 30 years, so, and in land development. So, a lot of these parcels are already well protected by the fact that the value of them themselves as a whole is more than the sum of the parts, especially if you put, restrictive zoning on them. So a lot of that, is, I think some of that is a little bit incorrect thinking in that all of this property is just going to be developed like that.
Yeah.
And then also, let's not forget, there are incentives, and where this is where, I think we should really concentrate, like our Conservation Advisory Council should concentrate, is looking at some of these parcels and then getting them in touch with people like the Oblong to say, do you understand the tax benefit that you might have by putting on a conservation easement or a forestry easement? There's or conservation. So there's tons of ways out there to educate some of the people that might own some of these large pieces of land.
That's actually a very good point, what you just brought up. You may have just given us a recommendation and you don't know it, but maybe a trade-off on a large agricultural parcel, if you have an incentive that allows you to do something a little bit extra, maybe part of the trade-off is a conservation easement. Take and put you're going to dedicate a portion of that property, we can work in some sort of a minimum, but require somebody, like, if you get this, you have to give something, and find that right balance. But that's at least that's what I just took from what you just said,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
keywords, I think that's a good recommendation that we'll take that.
Good. Well, like I said, those are just some of the concerns that I have now. The devil is in the details, and a lot of it, and lastly, maybe you can just explain how this then translates into because to me, it would be a lot more helpful. I mean, I understand, so here's the comprehensive plan, but it really depends on the changes in zoning and how that relates to this plan. So you could be very restrictive and still have the general ideas here, and then maybe I'd be less concerned. So what is the process from here to actually changing the zoning to reflect this?
So that's a town board issue. So the town board drives everything. So like I had said, the town board is the group that actually convenes this committee. They appoint us. So our job right now is to create the comprehensive plan. Once that comprehensive plan, we feel that it's complete and we're all in agreement on that we think that we have a good document, we're going to pass that on to the town board. I can't speak for the town board. I hope that they take it and that they run with it. Because the last comprehensive plan, or it was a master plan at that time, was from 1993 in the town. So the town of Dover is ready for their comprehensive plan. So, fingers crossed that they take that and they start the process, as I had mentioned prior, that they would take that. The town board can go through it, just like what we are. They can dissect it. They may have sections that they don't like. At that point, it would be well within their ability to change some wording or look at the land use map and say, well, we'd rather do this, or that. Or maybe they can even have the possibility to kick it back to us and say, relook at this section or that section. Or if they like it, they can go right into the seeker process. They can start to circulate it. Their attorney would work with them and, like I said, go through the seeker process. They'll have their own public hearings on it. And then if they adopt it, they can also elect to move forward on updating the zoning as well, too.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
And then the zoning would be a public hearing and everything at
Go through
the
the
town
same
board side.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably the time to debate certain very specifics. You drill down very
Got
deep,
it.
because this is still the general roadmap, general recommendations, and ideas, trying to get ideas on the table and identify areas that maybe got overlooked in the past, or areas that have a blight, or areas where there are issues.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
again.
you. Is there any other comment?
Is that a follow-up question?
Sure, yeah, just step up to the microphone so you're on audio.
Yeah, hi. Philip Van Buren again. I just had a question about the floating development zones.
Yeah. Just one, we're just recommending that the town could consider an economic development zone. General language of it, but not applying it on a certain property.
Yeah, I guess my question is why is that not spot zoning?
Well, we haven't worked through the legal part of it, but this was actually something recommended to us by Dutchess County Planning. They actually thought it was a good idea, giving a lot of flexibility to the town. So that's actually where we got the idea, just to put that clearly on the record, that Dutchess County Planning highly recommended that to us as an efficient way, an efficient tool for a town to have. So it wouldn't be spot zoning, because what I believe is that to do it properly and include it in the zoning code, it has to be set up with some more specifics than what we're even talking about tonight. But there would be certain criteria that a project would have to meet. So once again, hate to use the same terminology, but the devil in the details. But when that language is written, there would have to be a series of criteria We could also exclude certain districts or certain areas where it couldn't apply. But I think it's easier to exclude certain areas, like if we said, looking at the land use map, well, that wouldn't apply to the RC, or maybe it doesn't apply to the hamlet areas, or it doesn't apply to a certain area, or projects with wetlands within so far, maybe, you know, it's written into there, if you're going to do a project with a wetland there, well, maybe we enhance the adjacent areas or the buffer areas to those. There's a whole list of criteria that somebody would have to meet. It's not just, it would never be written, do whatever you want, come up with any crazy idea on any piece of property and go present it to the town board. And it would also they would have to prove how that it's economic development and meet state standards for economic development as well, too. So it wouldn't be just a free-for-all, so to speak.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see example of those criteria.
Yes.
Because it sounds like otherwise is just a way to override
Right.
any zoning law.
Yeah, it sounds like an
And-
open-ended free-for-all.
And how is that supported by a comprehensive plan?
Right.
So,
Okay, yeah, I think that's actually a very good additional comment, that we start to work on drafting some of that, maybe some example language to go along with this if we're going to recommend it.
Yeah.
That when we send it to the town board and say, here's some draft language on that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Cortine?
Good evening, Ryan Cortine, Planning Board Chair, former town supervisor. I'm glad to see this process has continued since we started it back in 2010. And I just asked, I really answer the gentleman's question. My understanding of the whole process is it wouldn't be spot zoning because you're considering as part of the comprehensive plan. So if you consider within the comprehensive plan an option to have the town board take further action in the future on a particular zone, then you're saying that that's part of the comprehensive plan, and so it's not, in that case, then spot zoning. It would be spot zoning if the town board said, hey, you know, this little green piece, we're going to turn into a red piece for really no reason at all, then that would be spot zoning. But as long as it's within the, comprehensive plan being considered, then again, like I said, my understanding of the whole process is that would not be spot zoning.
Yeah, no, and I actually would agree with that 100% because the whole idea of it, like we're talking about tonight, is aired out to the public, and concerns, like what we're already hearing tonight, over, what the economic development zone could be,
Right.
Are aired. Comments are, we address those, the town board can address those, and tailor the language to be appropriate.
Right. But, as was brought up, I mean, I guess to use another cliche, it could open Pandora's box of, well, then, if we're allowing this and that's part of the comprehensive plan, then what about this, what about that? It just could keep this box that just keeps opening further and further up. So, yeah, it's, certainly there's, a concern. But I'm just saying, again, it wouldn't be, my understanding is, it wouldn't be by definition spot zoning because it's considered as part of the whole comprehensive plan
Yes.
process. So,
And it goes through the seeker process as well.
okay.
Oh, thank you, Ron. Any other comments? Okay, I guess seeing no more comments, the committee will close their public hearing, and we appreciate everybody for coming this evening and providing comments. Would you like to? Yeah. Okay. All right, so our supervisor, Rich Eno, is got some words to say.
Thank you, Rich. I'm sure everybody knows me, but those of you watching out there in the real world, I am supervisor. My name is Rich Eno. I just want to first and foremost say thank you. The committee that we put together just about 2 years ago now, and then COVID hit, we're actually about 8 months behind schedule, maybe 6 or 7. But we put that committee together, and I've said it in the past, we put, engineers and planners and former and now chairs of planning boards and zoning boards and large management firms that manage complexes and sites, and just a wealth of knowledge. And then we bring in a consultant with grant money who helped lead us the way down the path that we've led to tonight. The amount of work that have been put into this meeting twice a month, sometimes three if the weeks fall right? And then finally getting to this point and putting it out. And sir, I assure you, we'll try to find a better way to get the word out. But what we use is we use social media, because that's just the way it is now. So, but I heard you. Our town clerk heard you. Councilwoman Jackson heard you. So we'll find it. We'll try to figure something out. Going back to the old lick the stamp and doing a mailing, that kind of went away years ago, but maybe that's what we need to do. So, but again, I want to just say thank you to all of you. Your committee has worked your tails off, and I appreciate it. And I thank everybody for the comments tonight, and I'm sure we'll receive some more. But this is the first step of still a pretty long process. We have to go through some things. And to those who aren't here tonight, Peter had to leave, Deborah had to leave, I thank them as well. And I thank former members of the committee. And, but I do appreciate it. I think I can speak on behalf of the board. Rich, thank you for leading the way. We still got a road to hoe, but we're going to get there. And hopefully with the research and the work that you've all put in, this will be the move to make for the next 30 years, just like the last one was, or what they thought it was. So I thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. And then just put out there one more time, if anybody has any written comments, please get them to the town clerk by March 1st. That would be great if you could do that. Thank you very much.
Well,